The conductor's voice still echoed in Evelyn's ears as the train disappeared into the horizon, swallowed by heat shimmer and distance. Arroyo Seco, miss. End of the line for you. Except it wasn't supposed to be. She stood on the warped wooden platform with her single carpet bag, watching the locomotive become a black smudge against the punishing sky. Her ticket said Cedar Falls. The letter in her pocket, creased from 100 nervous readings, said Cedar Falls. Thomas Whitmore of Cedar Falls, seeking a respectable woman for marriage, room and board provided. Future secured. This wasn't Cedar Falls. Arroyo Seco barely qualified as a town. 3 buildings clustered around the station like they'd huddled there for protection and given up. A general store with a crooked sign. Something that might have been a boarding house once, now listing to one side like a drunk. And a water tower that cast the only substantial shadow for miles. Evelyn's hands trembled as she unfolded the letter again, though she'd memorized every word weeks ago. Miss Hartley, I received your correspondence with great interest. A woman of education and moral character is precisely what Cedar Falls requires. The position as my wife would include— The paper crackled in the dry air. She'd been so careful with her response, so honest about her circumstances. Orphaned at 19, employment as a governess ended when the family moved to Boston without her. References available upon request. She'd sent the best photograph she could afford, wearing a borrowed dress that made her look almost prosperous. She'd spent her last real money on the train ticket. You lost, miss. Evelyn turned. A man in his 60s stood in the doorway of the general store, thumbs hooked in his suspenders. His face had the weathered look of old leather left too long in the sun. Her voice came out smaller than she intended. She cleared her throat. I'm looking for Cedar Falls. Is it nearby? The man's expression shifted to something like pity. Cedar Falls is 40 miles northeast. Different rail line entirely. 40 miles might as well have been 400. There must be a stage, Evelyn said, hating the desperate edge in her voice. Or someone traveling that direction who might— Stage runs Wednesdays. This is Friday. The man pulled a tobacco pouch from his pocket, not unkindly. And even if you caught it, that'd be $2 for the fare. $2. Evelyn had 67 cents in her purse and a silver locket she'd already decided she couldn't part with, the only thing left from her mother. The platform seemed to tilt under her feet. This couldn't be happening. She'd planned everything so carefully. Checked the schedule 3 times. Confirmed the station name with the ticket agent in Santa Fe. How did you— The man paused, choosing his words. How'd you end up on the wrong train, if you don't mind my asking? Because the ticket agent had been harried, and she'd been nervous. And somewhere in the transaction the words had gotten switched. Because she'd been too grateful for any opportunity to question it. Because desperation made people careless. A mistake, Evelyn said quietly. Well, the man lit his tobacco, squinting at her through the smoke. Boarding house there might have a room. Mrs. Chen's fare with her rates. You could wire your people. Wait for— I don't have people. The words hung in the hot air between them. Evelyn wanted to take them back, make herself less pathetic, but what was the point? The truth was the truth. The man's expression softened further, which somehow made it worse. Listen, miss, you seem like a decent sort, but Arroyo Seco ain't the kind of place for a woman alone. Not much here except hard living and harder men. If you got any way to get back where you came from, there's nothing to get back to. It came out sharper than she intended. The man held up his hands in a placating gesture, backing toward his store. Evelyn stood alone on the platform, her carpet bag growing heavier by the second. The sun beat down with physical force. Sweat trickled down her spine, making her traveling dress stick to her skin. She had left St. Louis with such hope. The city had been suffocating her. The same boarding house walls, the same pitying looks from the landlady, the same grinding certainty that her options were narrowing to nothing. When Thomas Whitmore's advertisement appeared in the matrimonial news, it felt like a door opening. Established rancher seeks educated woman for marriage. Must be of good character and willing temperament. No finery required, but genuine partnership offered. Right to— She'd written that very night. Poured herself into the letter. Not desperate, she'd been careful about that, but honest. Hopeful. The kind of woman who could make a home in rough country, who understood that life wasn't always gentle. His response had come within 2 weeks. Encouraging, almost warm. She'd let herself imagine it, home of her own, purpose, maybe even, eventually, something like contentment. Now she stood in the wrong town, with no way forward and no way back. The platform boards creaked as Evelyn sank onto her bag. She should think, make a plan. The boarding house, maybe Mrs. Chen would let her work for the room while she figured something out, or the general store might need help. She could write to Thomas Whitmore, explain the situation, ask him to send fare for the stage, except that would take days. And she'd have to admit her mistake. And what kind of man wanted a wife who couldn't even manage to arrive at the correct station? A fly buzzed near her face. Evelyn waved it away, then put her head in her hands. She would not cry. She'd survived worse than this. When her parents died, consumption, both of them within a month, she'd been 19 with no inheritance and no prospects. She'd found work anyway, made herself useful, kept moving. This was just another obstacle, another closed door. She'd find a window. The sound of hoofbeats made her look up. A wagon rattled into view, pulled by two horses that looked as tired as Evelyn felt. The driver was a man in his 30s, broad-shouldered and sun-darkened, with dark hair that needed cutting. He wore work clothes, dusty trousers, a shirt with the sleeves rolled up, a hat that had seen better days. Next to him sat a little girl. Evelyn straightened instinctively. The child couldn't have been more than 5 or 6, small for her age, with tangled brown hair and a smudged face. She wore a dress that might have been blue once, now faded to the color of old sky. The wagon pulled up to the general store. The man set the brake and climbed down, moving with the careful stiffness of someone who'd been working since dawn. "Pete," he called to the store owner, "got that order ready?" "Give me a minute, Caleb." The old man disappeared inside. The little girl remained in the wagon, swinging her legs. Her feet didn't reach the footboard. She looked around the empty street with the bored expression of a child who'd seen it all before and found it wanting. Then her eyes landed on Evelyn. For a moment, they just looked at each other. The girl's expression shifted. Confusion, then something Evelyn couldn't quite read. Hope, maybe. Or recognition. Before Evelyn could react, the child scrambled down from the wagon with alarming speed. Her father, Caleb, turned at the movement. "Lila, wait!" But the girl was already running. She crossed the dusty street in a stumbling sprint, her too long dress tangling around her ankles. Evelyn stood frozen as the child barreled toward her, arms outstretched. "Mama!" The word hit Evelyn like a physical blow. She barely had time to brace herself before the girl crashed into her, small arms wrapping around her waist with desperate strength. "Mama, you came back!" The voice was muffled against Evelyn's dress, thick with tears. "I knew you would. I knew it." Evelyn's hands hovered uselessly. The child was shaking, crying, holding on like Evelyn was the only solid thing in a tilting world. Evelyn started, then stopped. What could she possibly say? Footsteps approached rapidly. The man, Caleb, reached them, breathing hard. "Lila." His voice was tight. "Lila, let go." "No!" The girl's grip tightened. "It's Mama. She's here." "That's not—" Caleb's jaw worked. He met Evelyn's eyes over his daughter's head, and the look there was complicated, apologetic, exhausted, devastated. "I'm sorry. She doesn't— Lila, please." He reached for the child, but she twisted away, burrowing deeper against Evelyn. Evelyn's heart cracked. She'd seen grief before, wore it herself most days like an old coat. But this raw, desperate need in a child who'd mistaken a stranger for salvation, this was different. Slowly, carefully, Evelyn lowered her hands to the girl's shoulders. The small body was trembling. "Sweetheart," Evelyn said softly, "I think there's been a mistake." "No!" The word came out fierce. "You look like her. You have the same—" The girl pulled back just enough to look up at Evelyn's face, tears streaming down her own. "Please, please be my mama." The please broke something in Evelyn's chest. Caleb crouched down, his face level with his daughter's. His voice gentled. "Lila, this lady's just passing through. She's not—" He took a breath. "Your mama's gone, honey. We talked about this." "But she promised!" Lila's voice climbed toward hysteria. "She promised she'd never leave me." "I know." Caleb's hand shook slightly as he reached for his daughter again. I know she did, but sometimes— You're lying! Lila jerked away from both of them, her face red and blotchy. Everybody lies. Mrs. Patterson said Mama was just sick, but she didn't come back. And you said— Her words dissolved into sobs. She stood there in the dust, small and furious and completely shattered. Evelyn felt something shift inside her, some calculation she didn't entirely understand. She knelt down, bringing herself to the child's level. Caleb tensed, but didn't intervene. You're right, Evelyn said quietly. People do lie sometimes, and I won't lie to you. She waited until Lila's crying quieted enough for her to hear. I'm not your mama. I'm sorry. I wish I could be who you're looking for, but I'm not her. Lila's face crumpled again. Then who are you? My name's Evelyn. Evelyn Hartley. She pulled a handkerchief from her sleeve and offered it. And I think maybe I'm someone who's just as lost as you are right now. The girl took the handkerchief, wiping her face with clumsy hands. You're lost? Very lost. I got on the wrong train and now I'm in the wrong town and I don't know what to do next. Evelyn managed a small smile. So if you have any ideas, I'd be grateful to hear them. Lila stared at her. Some of the wildness faded from her eyes, replaced by cautious curiosity. You could come home with us. Lila, Caleb started. We got space. The girl's voice gained confidence. Daddy's always saying the house is too big now, and you need somewhere to go, and— She looked between Evelyn and her father, some childish logic working itself out. And maybe you could stay for a while, just until you're not lost anymore. Evelyn glanced up at Caleb. He looked like a man caught between competing disasters trying to choose the least catastrophic option. That's very kind, Evelyn said carefully, but I'm sure your father has enough to worry about without— Please. Lila grabbed Evelyn's hand. Her fingers were sticky and small and surprisingly strong. Please come, just for today. You could have supper with us, and then maybe you could tell me about where you come from. And I could show you my room. And— Lila. Caleb's voice cut through the flood of words. Not harsh, but firm. Miss Hartley doesn't need a child pestering her. I don't mind, Evelyn heard herself say. Caleb's eyes snapped to hers. She saw the question there. Why would you encourage this? But also something else. A kind of desperate hope that made him look younger than his years. You don't owe us anything, he said. My daughter's going through a difficult time, but that's not your burden. No, Evelyn agreed. She looked down at Lila, who was watching her with an intensity that felt like a physical weight. But I don't have anywhere else to be. And honestly, she took a breath. I could use the company. The admission hung in the air. Evelyn waited for him to refuse, to thank her politely and take his daughter home and leave Evelyn to her own problems. Instead, Caleb studied her face for a long moment. Whatever he saw there made his shoulders drop slightly. All right, he said quietly. Just for supper. Lila's face transformed. The grief-stricken child from moments ago vanished, replaced by something bright and almost feverish with hope. She tugged on Evelyn's hand. Come on, you can sit next to me in the wagon, and I'll show you my best rock. And, oh, we have chickens. Do you like chickens? Evelyn let herself be pulled along, trying not to think about what she was doing. This was temporary. A few hours, maybe. A meal and a rest, and then she'd figure out her next move. Caleb retrieved her carpet bag from the platform without being asked. When Pete emerged from the store with a crate of supplies, Caleb loaded it quickly, his movements efficient but distracted. The wagon ride started in silence. Lila sat between them, pressed against Evelyn's side like she was afraid she might disappear. The child kept sneaking glances at her, then looking away quickly when caught. How long's the ride? Evelyn asked, just to break the quiet. About 30 minutes. Caleb kept his eyes on the road. Place is called Cross Creek. Not much of a creek anymore, but the name stuck. What do you raise? Cattle, mostly. Some horses. He paused. It's a working ranch, not fancy. There was a defensive note in his voice, like he expected her to judge him. Evelyn almost laughed, as if she was in any position to judge anyone. I grew up on a farm, she offered, before my parents passed. Nothing like this country, but I understand hard work. Caleb's hands relaxed slightly on the reins. What brought you out here? It was a polite question, the kind strangers asked each other. But the real answer, desperation, loneliness, a mail-order marriage that might never happen, felt too heavy to speak aloud. I was hoping for a fresh start, Evelyn said instead. Guess I'll have to work a bit harder for it than I planned. Something like sympathy crossed Caleb's face. Yeah, fresh starts are harder than folks make them sound. They fell back into silence. Evelyn watched the landscape roll past, endless brown earth dotted with scrub brush, mountains hazy in the distance. It was beautiful in a harsh way, unforgiving, the kind of place that didn't care about your plans or your hopes. That's our land, Lila said suddenly, pointing. See the fence? Daddy built that. And over there's where the cattle go when it's hot. And oh, that's where I found a bird's nest last spring. There were babies in it, 4 of them. The girl chattered on, her earlier distress apparently forgotten. Or buried. Evelyn couldn't tell which. The house appeared gradually, resolving out of the heat shimmer like a mirage becoming solid. It was bigger than Evelyn expected. A 2-story structure with a wraparound porch and several outbuildings scattered nearby. The wood was weathered but maintained. Someone cared about this place. Home, Lila announced, as if Evelyn might have missed it. Caleb pulled the wagon around to the side of the house. When he climbed down, his movements were careful again, controlled, like he was holding something back. Evelyn accepted his hand to descend, hyper-aware of the brief contact. His palm was calloused, warm. He released her quickly. I'll show you the kitchen, Lila said, grabbing Evelyn's hand again. And you can meet the chickens. And, Lila, Caleb's voice stopped her. Miss Hartley probably wants to wash up first, and you need to let her breathe. The girl's face fell. Evelyn felt it like a punch. Actually, she said, I'd love to meet the chickens. Lila's smile could have lit the whole territory. The next 2 hours passed in a blur of small moments. Lila showed her everything. The chicken coop, the barn, her collection of interesting rocks, the tree she'd climbed once and gotten stuck in. The girl talked almost constantly, filling every silence with words like she was afraid Evelyn would disappear if things got too quiet. Caleb watched from a distance, tending to the horses and unloading supplies. Every time Evelyn looked his way, his expression was complicated, grateful, worried, sad. When the sun started dropping toward the horizon, Lila finally ran out of things to show. They sat on the porch steps, the child pressed against Evelyn's side like she belonged there. Are you really going to leave? Lila asked quietly. Evelyn's throat tightened. I have to find my way to Cedar Falls. The man I was supposed to meet. What if he's not nice? The question was so earnest, so full of concern for a stranger's welfare, that Evelyn had to look away. I'm sure he'll be fine, she said, without much conviction. But what if he's not? Lila persisted. What if he's mean? What if you don't like him? Then I'll figure something else out. You could stay here. Lila's voice got smaller. We got space, and She stopped, picking at a splinter in the porch boards. I get lonely sometimes. Daddy works a lot, and the house is real quiet now. Evelyn's chest ached. Sweetheart. Lila. Caleb's voice came from the doorway. Time to wash up for supper. The girl stood reluctantly. She looked between her father and Evelyn, then ran inside without another word. Caleb stepped onto the porch, keeping a careful distance. I need to apologize. Again. She's been, since her mother... He stopped, regrouped. She doesn't usually attach to people like this. It's all right. It's not. He leaned against the porch railing, exhaustion written in every line of his body. Sarah, my wife, passed 8 months ago. Fever. It was fast. He said it like he was reading from a script he'd memorized. Lila keeps thinking she'll come back. She sees women sometimes, in town or passing by, and she wants her mother, Evelyn finished softly. Yeah, Caleb's voice roughened. And I can't give her that. I can't bring Sarah back. And watching her hope every damn time, he caught himself. Sorry. Don't be. They stood in the growing dark, 2 strangers caught in circumstances neither had planned for. You really got nowhere to go? Caleb asked finally. Evelyn considered lying, making herself less pathetic. But what was the point? Not right now, No. He was quiet for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice was careful. I could use some help around here. Temporary. Just until you get yourself situated. Evelyn's heart jumped. What kind of help? Cooking, cleaning, keeping an eye on Lila when I'm working. He wouldn't look at her. It wouldn't be charity. I'd pay you. Room and board plus wages. And when you're ready to move on, when you figure out your next step, no hard feelings. It was a terrible idea. Evelyn knew that immediately, getting tangled up with this grieving family, this desperate child, this man who could barely hold himself together. It was asking for heartbreak. But the alternative was the boarding house, or the street, or crawling back to St. Louis with her tail between her legs. How long are we talking? She asked. However long you need. Week, month. Longer, if it suits. He finally met her eyes. I know it's asking a lot, and I know Lila's going to get more attached, but He took a breath. I'm drowning here, and she needs someone, and you need somewhere to be, so maybe we can help each other out, just for a while. Just for a while. Temporary. A stopping point, not a destination. Evelyn thought about Thomas Whitmore, waiting in Cedar Falls for a bride who'd never arrived. She thought about her empty pockets and her limited options. She thought about Lila's small hand in hers and the way the child's face had lit up when Evelyn agreed to meet the chickens. All right, she heard herself say. Just for a while. Caleb's shoulders dropped like she'd lifted a weight off them. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Evelyn said. I might be terrible at this. Can't be worse than what I've been doing. They went inside. The house was clean but impersonal, like someone had maintained it without really living in it. Lila set the table with exaggerated care, sneaking glances at Evelyn every few seconds. Supper was simple. Stew that Caleb had clearly made in bulk and been eating for days, bread that was only slightly stale. They ate mostly in silence. Evelyn noticed the empty chair at the table, noticed how both Caleb and Lila avoided looking at it. This is good, Evelyn said, just to say something. It's not, Caleb replied, but his mouth twitched slightly, almost a smile. After the meal, Lila showed Evelyn to a room on the second floor. It was small but neat, with a bed and a dresser and a window overlooking the darkening land. This was the spare room, Lila explained, but now it's yours, for as long as you want. The phrasing made Evelyn's throat tight. Thank you. Lila lingered in the doorway, twisting the hem of her dress. Miss Evelyn? Yes? Are you really staying? You're not going to leave in the morning? The hope in the child's voice was devastating. I'm really staying, Evelyn said. For a while, at least. Promise? Evelyn thought about all the broken promises that had led her here. The ticket agent who'd given her the wrong information. Thomas Whitmore, who was probably cursing her name in Cedar Falls. Her own naive belief that a fresh start would be simple. But looking at this child, this small, fierce, heartbroken girl who'd grabbed onto a stranger like a lifeline, Evelyn couldn't bring herself to hedge. I promise, she said. Lila's smile was like sunrise. She ran forward and threw her arms around Evelyn's waist one more time, quick and fierce, then ran from the room before Evelyn could respond. Alone, Evelyn sank onto the bed. The mattress was softer than any she'd slept on in months. The room was quiet. Safe. She should feel relieved, grateful. She had a roof over her head. Work. A purpose, however temporary. Instead, she felt terrified. Because she'd made a promise to a child who'd already lost too much. Because she'd agreed to stay in a house haunted by grief. Because she'd stepped off that train this morning as one person, desperate, alone, running toward an uncertain future, and somehow, in the space of a few hours, become someone else entirely. Someone's employee, someone's hope, someone who mattered, at least for now. Evelyn pulled the letter from her pocket one last time. Thomas Whitmore's careful script, outlining a future that would never happen. She should write to him. Explain. Apologize. Tomorrow, she told herself. Tomorrow she'd figure all that out. Tonight, she'd let herself rest in this wrong place, with these wrong people, in this wrong life, that somehow felt more right than anything had in years. Outside her window, the New Mexico night settled in, vast and dark and unforgiving. Evelyn closed her eyes and listened to the unfamiliar sounds of her temporary home. Somewhere downstairs, Caleb moved through his evening routine. In the next room, Lila settled into bed. And in this small room, a woman who'd gotten on the wrong train let herself believe just for a moment that maybe wrong could become right, that maybe detours were just undiscovered roads, that maybe the worst mistake of her life might turn out to be the best thing that ever happened to her, just for a while. Evelyn woke to the smell of burning coffee and a child's voice drifting through the floorboards. "Told you, I can do it myself. I'm not a baby." "Never said you were," Caleb's voice, patient but strained. "But you need to eat more than just bread." "I don't like eggs anymore." "Since when?" "Since forever." Evelyn lay still for a moment, disoriented. The ceiling above her was unfamiliar, the mattress too soft. Then memory rushed back. The wrong station, the desperate child. The promise she'd made to stay. Just for a while. She dressed quickly in the same travel-worn clothes from yesterday, trying to smooth the wrinkles with her palms. Her reflection in the small mirror looked tired, uncertain. She pinned her hair back with shaking hands and went downstairs. The kitchen was chaos contained. Caleb stood at the stove, attempting to scrape something black out of a pan. Lila sat at the table, arms crossed, glaring at a plate of toast. "Morning," Evelyn said from the doorway. Both of them turned. Lila's face transformed instantly, the sullen expression replaced by pure joy. "You're still here!" "I said I would be." "I know, but—" The girl stopped herself, some complicated emotion crossing her face. "People say things sometimes." The words hung heavy. Evelyn crossed to the table and sat down across from Lila, meeting her eyes directly. "I don't break promises to people I care about," she said quietly. "And I'm starting to care about you quite a bit." Lila ducked her head, but not before Evelyn saw the smile. Caleb abandoned the pan and turned around. He looked like he'd been up for hours, dressed for work, already dusty. "There's coffee. Fair warning, it's bad." "I've had worse." Evelyn poured herself a cup from the pot on the stove. He wasn't lying. It tasted like boiled dirt. She drank it anyway. "I need to ride out to the north pasture," Caleb said, not quite meeting her eyes. "Check the fence line. There's food in the pantry. Help yourself to whatever. And if you need anything—" "We'll be fine," Evelyn said. He looked at her for a long moment, like he was trying to decide if he believed that. Then he grabbed his hat from the peg by the door. "Lila," he said, "you listened to Miss Hartley today. Understand?" "I always listen," Lila said, too innocent. Caleb's mouth twitched, almost a smile again. "That's not even close to true." He left through the back door. Evelyn heard his boots on the porch, then the creak of the barn door. Minutes later, hoofbeats faded into the distance. The kitchen fell quiet. Lila poked at her toast. "He tries really hard." "I can see that. But he's not good at the cooking part, or the cleaning part, or—" She stopped. "Mama used to do all that, and she was good at it. She made things nice." Evelyn took another sip of terrible coffee. "Tell me about her." Lila's eyes went wide. "Really? Really?" The girl's face did something complicated. Grief and gratitude tangled together. She took a breath. She had brown hair, like mine, but prettier, and she sang when she cooked, and she smelled like— Lila frowned, concentrating. "Like bread, and soap, and something else I can't remember anymore." "Lavender, maybe?" "Maybe." Lila's voice went small. "I'm forgetting things. Her voice sounds different in my head now, and I can't remember what her hands looked like. Isn't that awful? I can't remember my own mama's hands." Evelyn's throat closed. She reached across the table and took Lila's small hand in hers. "It's not awful," she said. "It's normal. Our memories fade, but that doesn't mean what we felt fades. The love's still there. It just changes shape." Lila looked down at their joined hands. "Do you remember your mama?" "Some things. Not as much as I'd like." Evelyn squeezed gently. "She died when I was 19. That feels like a long time ago now." "Does it stop hurting?" The question was so earnest, so desperately hopeful. Evelyn wanted to lie, to tell this child that grief had an expiration date, that one day she'd wake up and the ache would be gone. But she'd promised not to lie. "Not completely," she said. "But it gets easier to carry. Like, Like it becomes part of you instead of something crushing you. Does that make sense? Lila nodded slowly. I think so. They sat in the quiet kitchen, hands linked across the scarred table. Outside, chickens clucked. Somewhere in the distance, cattle lowed. So what do we do now? Lila asked finally. Evelyn looked around at the disaster of the kitchen. Burned pan in the sink, dishes stacked haphazardly, floor that needed sweeping. She thought about her conversation with Caleb last night. Temporary help. Room and board plus wages. She stood up. Now we get to work. The day unfolded in a series of small discoveries. Evelyn found the pantry reasonably well stocked but disorganized. Flour mixed with canned goods, dried beans in 3 different containers. The dishes were clean but chipped. The floors were swept but not scrubbed. Everything spoke of a man doing his best and falling short. Lila followed Evelyn around like a shadow, chattering constantly. She showed Evelyn where things were kept, offered commentary on every drawer and cabinet, and asked approximately 600 questions. Why do you fold the towels that way? Do you like chickens or horses better? Can you braid hair? Daddy can't braid hair. What's your favorite color? Have you ever seen the ocean? Evelyn answered patiently, learning as much as she taught. Lila was whip-smart and desperately starved for attention. She'd been managing more of the household than a 6-year-old should, trying to fill gaps she was too small to fill. By mid-morning, they'd reorganized the pantry and started bread dough rising. Lila stood on a chair next to Evelyn, her small hands covered in flour. You push it like this, Evelyn demonstrated, kneading the dough. Firm, but not too hard. You want to work it, not beat it to death. Lila copied her movements, tongue poking out in concentration. Mama used to let me help sometimes, but I always messed it up. You're doing fine. Really? Really. Evelyn wiped a streak of flour off the girl's nose. You're a natural. Lila beamed. They worked in companionable silence for a while. Then Lila said, Miss Evelyn? Are you going to marry my daddy? Evelyn's hands stilled in the dough. What? Mrs. Patterson said. Lila stopped, suddenly fascinated by her own floury hands. She said Daddy needs to find a new wife, that it's not right him raising me alone. She said people talk. Mrs. Patterson sounds like she has opinions about things that aren't her business, Evelyn said carefully. She's mean. Lila's voice went flat. She came by after Mama died and said she'd take me. Said I needed a woman's influence, but Daddy told her no. Good for your daddy. But what if... Lila's voice wobbled. What if she comes back? What if she makes him give me away? Evelyn abandoned the dough and crouched down so she was eye level with the girl. Lila, look at me. She waited until the child met her eyes. Your father loves you. He's not going to let anyone take you away. You understand? But Mrs. Patterson said, I don't care what Mrs. Patterson said. Your daddy would fight off a whole army before he'd let someone take you. Evelyn smoothed Lila's hair back from her face. You're safe here. I promise. Lila threw her arms around Evelyn's neck, heedless of the flour covering both of them. Evelyn held her tight, thinking about small girls and big fears and the weight of promises. When Lila finally pulled back, her eyes were suspiciously bright. But you didn't answer. About marrying Daddy. That's because I'm not going to marry your daddy, Evelyn said gently. I'm just here to help out for a while. That's all. But you could, if you wanted. He's nice, and he works hard, and Lila... The girl stopped, hearing something in Evelyn's voice. Your daddy's grieving, Evelyn said quietly. He loved your mama very much, and that doesn't just go away because it would be convenient. Marriage isn't... It's not something you do just because it seems practical. Oh, Lila looked down. I just thought, maybe if you stayed. I know, sweetheart, but some things don't work that way. They went back to the bread in silence. Evelyn tried not to think about the hope in Lila's voice, tried not to imagine what it would feel like to actually belong here, to make this temporary arrangement something permanent, tried not to remember that she'd come west to marry a stranger anyway. So how was this really different? Except it was different. Thomas Whitmore was a transaction, a practical arrangement between two people with clear expectations. This This messy, complicated situation with a grieving widower and his desperate daughter, this was something else entirely. Something dangerous. The bread went into the oven. Evelyn set Lila to shelling peas on the back porch while she tackled the disaster of the stove. Someone, Caleb, presumably, had let grease and grime build up for months, maybe longer. She was elbow-deep in grimy water when she heard the horse. Evelyn dried her hands and stepped onto the porch. A woman was dismounting from a fine bay mare, her riding habit immaculate despite the dust. She was perhaps 50, handsome in a severe way, with iron-gray hair pulled back tight. "You must be the new girl," the woman said, not bothering with introductions. Lila went very still. "Mrs. Patterson?" Everything clicked into place. This was the woman who'd wanted to take Lila, who'd said a child needed a woman's influence, who'd apparently made herself the moral authority of Arroyo Seco. "I'm Evelyn Hartley," Evelyn said, keeping her voice neutral. "Can I help you with something?" Mrs. Patterson tied her horse to the porch rail with practiced efficiency. "I heard Caleb hired someone. Thought I'd come see for myself." "See what exactly?" "Whether the gossip's true." The woman's eyes were sharp, assessing. "Young woman, traveling alone, moving into a widower's house. You can imagine what people are saying." Evelyn felt heat climb her neck. "I'm employed as household help. Room and board in exchange for work. There's nothing improper about it." "Isn't there?" Mrs. Patterson climbed the porch steps without invitation. "A pretty young thing, living under the same roof as a man not yet through his mourning period, with a child present, no less. It looks bad, Miss Hartley." "Then perhaps people should mind their own business." The words came out sharper than Evelyn intended. Mrs. Patterson's eyebrows rose. "I'm trying to help," she said, with the kind of false sweetness that made Evelyn's teeth ache. "You're new here. You don't understand how things work. Reputation matters, and right now you're damaging both yours and Caleb's." "Miss Evelyn's nice," Lila said suddenly, standing up, "and she's helping, and you should leave." "Lila Cross, you mind your manners." "No." The girl's voice shook but held firm. "You tried to take me away from Daddy. You said mean things about Mama. You don't get to come here and say mean things about Miss Evelyn, too." Mrs. Patterson's face hardened. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. The child's running wild. She needs proper guidance, a woman's hand, not," she gestured at Evelyn, "some stranger who showed up out of nowhere." Evelyn stepped between them, putting herself physically between Mrs. Patterson and Lila. Something protective and fierce rose in her chest. "I think you should go," she said quietly. "I'm trying to help you see reason." "No, you're trying to bully a child and shame me for accepting honest work." Evelyn met the woman's eyes steadily. "And I'm asking you politely to leave, before I stop being polite." For a moment, Mrs. Patterson looked genuinely taken aback. Then her expression hardened into something cold. "You'll regret this," she said. "Both of you. This isn't proper, and I won't stand by and watch this household fall into disgrace." She left without another word, mounting her horse and riding off in a cloud of dust. Evelyn stood on the porch, her heart pounding. Behind her, Lila's breathing was quick and shallow. "Are you okay?" Evelyn asked, turning. Lila nodded, but her eyes were bright with tears. "She's going to make trouble. She always makes trouble. Let her try." The words came out with more confidence than Evelyn felt. The truth was, Mrs. Patterson was right about one thing. Reputation mattered, especially for a woman alone. If people started talking, started making assumptions about impropriety, it could destroy any chance Evelyn had of building a life here. Not that she was building a life here. She was staying temporarily, just until she figured out her next move. Except right now, defending this household felt a lot like claiming it as her own. They went back inside. The bread smelled ready. Evelyn pulled it from the oven, golden and perfect. Lila's face lit up. "We made that," she said, awed. "We actually made that." "We did." They ate warm bread with butter for lunch, sitting at the kitchen table. Lila kept touching the loaf like she couldn't quite believe it was real. "Daddy's going to be so surprised," she said. "Good surprised, I hope." "The best surprised." Lila took another bite, chewing thoughtfully. "Miss Evelyn?" "What Mrs. Patterson said. About it looking bad, is she right? Evelyn chose her words carefully. Some people will always find something to criticize. That doesn't mean they're right. But it also doesn't mean their opinions don't matter. That's confusing. I know, Evelyn sighed. The truth is, sometimes we have to be careful about appearances, even when we're not doing anything wrong, because other people's judgment can hurt us. That's not fair. No, it's not. They cleaned up in silence. Evelyn's mind was spinning. Mrs. Patterson would talk. The story would spread. Young woman, living with widower, improper arrangement. It wouldn't matter that nothing untoward was happening. People would assume the worst. And if Thomas Whitmore heard about it, if word reached Cedar Falls that his intended bride had moved in with another man, Evelyn's stomach turned. She'd been so focused on surviving, on getting through each day, that she hadn't thought about how this looked, how it would sound in gossip. The hired help, the convenient woman who showed up just when Caleb needed someone, living under his roof, caring for his daughter, playing house. Except it wasn't like that. It wasn't. Was it? The afternoon passed in a blur of work. Evelyn threw herself into cleaning, scrubbing floors until her knees ached, beating rugs until dust clouded the air. Lila helped where she could, but eventually wandered off to play with her rocks, leaving Evelyn alone with her thoughts. She found herself in what had clearly been the master bedroom. The door was ajar. Evelyn knew she shouldn't go in, shouldn't invade Caleb's privacy. But something pulled her forward. The room was neat but sparse. The bed made with military precision, a dresser with a few personal items, a brush, a pocket watch, a faded photograph. Evelyn picked up the photograph. A woman looked back at her, pretty, with dark hair and a gentle smile. She stood next to a younger Caleb, his arm around her waist. Between them, a tiny Lila grinned at the camera. They looked happy. Whole. Evelyn set the photograph down carefully, feeling like an intruder. This was their life, their family. She had no place here. She was about to leave when she noticed the dresser drawer was slightly open. Inside, she caught a glimpse of fabric, soft, feminine, Sarah's clothes, still in the drawer, untouched. Evelyn's throat tightened. Caleb hadn't been able to let go, hadn't been able to pack away his wife's things, to accept that she was really gone. And into that unhealed wound, Evelyn had stumbled. A stranger wearing the wrong face, trying to fill a gap she had no business filling. She fled the room, heart pounding. By the time Caleb returned at sunset, the house was transformed. Floors scrubbed, surfaces gleaming, bread cooling on the counter. The smell of stew filled the kitchen. Real stew, not burned leavings. He stood in the doorway, just staring. Did you? He stopped, looking around. How did you? Had help. Evelyn nodded toward Lila, who was setting the table with exaggerated care. Your daughter's a hard worker. Caleb's expression did something complicated. I can see that. They ate dinner in near silence. Lila chattered enough for all of them, talking about the bread, the chickens, the new organization of the pantry. Caleb ate mechanically, his eyes distant. After Lila went to bed, Evelyn found him on the porch, staring out at the dark. Mrs. Patterson came by today, she said without preamble. His jaw tightened. What did she want? To tell me that my presence here is improper, that people are talking. Caleb's hands gripped the porch railing. Of course she did. Is she right? He turned to look at her. In the dim light from the kitchen, his face was all shadows. Are you asking if I hired you for improper reasons? No, I'm asking if I'm making things worse for you by being here. Worse how? Your reputation, Lila's situation, all of it. Evelyn wrapped her arms around herself against the cooling air. Mrs. Patterson said people are talking, and if they're talking, that could cause problems. For you, for Lila. Caleb was quiet for a long moment. What do you want me to say? That I don't care what people think? Do you? I care about my daughter. His voice was hard. I care that she's smiling again. That she ate a real meal tonight without a fight. That she's not... He stopped, regrouped. I care about the things that matter. Mrs. Patterson's gossip isn't one of them. But what if she's right? What if this arrangement is hurting more than helping? Is that what you think? Caleb turned to face her fully. That you're hurting us? Evelyn met his eyes. I think I'm a complication you don't need. Maybe. He didn't look away. Or maybe you're the first thing that's gone right in 8 months. Maybe my daughter's eating again and sleeping through the night, and I came home tonight to a house that felt like a home instead of a tomb. Maybe that's worth whatever Mrs. Patterson has to say about it. The words hung between them. Evelyn's heart hammered. I saw the photograph, she said quietly. In your room. Your wife was beautiful. Caleb's expression shuddered. You shouldn't have. I know. I'm sorry. The door was open and She stopped. I just want you to know, I'm not trying to replace her. I couldn't even if I wanted to. I know that. Do you? Evelyn's voice cracked slightly. Because Lila asked me today if I was going to marry you. And I think she's got this idea in her head that I'm some kind of substitute for what she lost. And that's not fair. To her, or to you, or to your wife's memory. Caleb was very still. What did you tell her? The truth. That I'm temporary. That I'm just here to help. Right. His voice had gone flat. Temporary. That's what we agreed on. It is. They stood in the uncomfortable silence. Evelyn wanted to say something else, to explain herself better, but the words wouldn't come. Finally, Caleb spoke. My wife's been gone 8 months, and for 8 months I've been trying to hold this place together with my bare hands, trying to be enough for Lila, trying to... He stopped. I know what people are saying, that I should have moved on by now, that I should find a new wife, give Lila a mother. Mrs. Patterson's been hinting at it since the funeral. You don't owe anyone. I know I don't. He cut her off. But here's the thing I'm learning. Sarah's gone, and I loved her, still do, but she's gone, and Lila's still here, and this ranch still needs running, and I can't... His voice broke slightly. I can't do it alone. I've been trying. It's not working. Evelyn's chest ached. Caleb, so maybe you're right. Maybe having you here is complicated. Maybe people will talk. But right now, I don't care. Because my daughter's happy, and the house doesn't feel empty, and that's worth more than reputation. He went inside before Evelyn could respond, leaving her alone on the porch with the weight of his words. She stood in the dark, listening to the night sounds of the ranch. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. The wind moved through the scrub brush with a sound like whispers. Evelyn thought about Mrs. Patterson's warning, about Thomas Whitmore still waiting in Cedar Falls, about promises and propriety and all the ways a woman's life could be ruined by perception. But she also thought about Lila's smile, about warm bread and scrubbed floors and the way Caleb's shoulders had relaxed when he walked into a clean house, about feeling needed, useful, like she mattered. Temporary, she told herself firmly. This is temporary. But standing there in the New Mexico darkness, Evelyn couldn't quite make herself believe it. Inside, a lamp flickered on in Lila's room. Evelyn saw the small silhouette at the window, looking out, looking for her. She raised her hand in a wave. Lila waved back, then pressed her palm against the glass. Evelyn's throat closed. She waved once more, then turned toward the door. Tomorrow she'd write to Thomas Whitmore, explain everything, apologize. She'd figure out the next step, the practical move, the sensible choice. But tonight she'd let herself belong to this broken little family that had claimed her by accident, just for a while longer. The days that followed fell into a rhythm. Evelyn woke before dawn, started coffee, got breakfast ready before Caleb left for the day's work. Lila would stumble downstairs sleepy-eyed and rumpled, pressing herself against Evelyn's side like she needed the contact to fully wake up. They'd eat together, the three of them, in the growing light. Caleb would outline his day's work. Lila would chatter about plans, checking on the chickens, finding new rocks, helping Miss Evelyn with whatever needed doing. Then Caleb would leave, and the house would become Evelyn and Lila's domain. They worked together, the girl learning and Evelyn teaching, how to knead bread properly, how to get wrinkles out of wash without a proper iron, how to organize a pantry so you could find what you needed. Small things, practical things, the kind of knowledge passed from mother to daughter. Except Evelyn wasn't Lila's mother. And every time she caught herself slipping into that role too easily, she'd force herself to pull back, remind herself of the temporary nature of this arrangement, just for a while. But Lila made it hard. The girl had opened up like a flower finding sun. She talked constantly now, filling Evelyn in on every thought, every memory, every fear. She'd started sleeping through the night, eating without being coaxed, smiling, and Evelyn found herself falling a little bit in love with this fierce, funny, heartbroken child who'd grabbed onto her in desperation and refused to let go. On the fourth day, as they hung laundry together in the yard, Lila said, "I'm glad you got on the wrong train." Evelyn's hand stilled on a sheet. "Are you?" "Uh-huh. Because if you got on the right train, you'd be somewhere else, with someone else, and we wouldn't have you." "That's true. Do you wish you were there instead? With that man you were supposed to marry?" Evelyn looked at the girl's earnest face, smudged with dirt and freckled from the sun. Thought about Thomas Whitmore, who she'd never met, who was probably a perfectly nice man, who'd offered her exactly what she'd thought she wanted: security, stability, a place to belong. "No," she said honestly, "I don't wish that." Lila's smile could have lit the whole territory. That night, after Lila went to bed, Evelyn sat at the kitchen table with paper and pen. She'd been putting off the letter to Thomas Whitmore for days, but it wasn't fair to leave him waiting, wondering if his mail-order bride would ever arrive. She wrote and crossed out 3 different openings before finally settling on something simple and honest. "Dear Mr. Whitmore, I owe you an explanation and an apology. Due to circumstances beyond my control, I was unable to arrive in Cedar Falls as planned. I understand this must have caused you inconvenience and disappointment. The truth is, I boarded the wrong train and found myself stranded in Arroyo Seco. I have since accepted employment with a local family and will not be continuing to Cedar Falls. I release you from any obligation you may have felt toward our arrangement, and I sincerely apologize for any trouble this has caused. Respectfully, Evelyn Hartley." She read it over twice, feeling the weight of what she was doing. Closing a door, choosing this uncertain present over that planned future. But the words felt right. Final. She sealed the envelope and set it aside to post in the morning. Done. Except she felt lighter instead of regretful, like she'd cut a rope that had been dragging her backward. Footsteps on the porch made her look up. Caleb came in through the back door, dusty and exhausted. He stopped when he saw her at the table. "You're up late," he said. "Couldn't sleep." He poured himself water from the pitcher, drank it in long swallows. Evelyn tried not to notice the way his throat worked, the sweat stains on his shirt, the capable strength in his hands. Tried not to think about Mrs. Patterson's words, about impropriety and reputation, and the way her heart kicked up when Caleb was near. "I need to go into town tomorrow," he said finally. "Get supplies. You and Lila should come along." "Is that wise? After Mrs. Patterson? I don't care what Mrs. Patterson thinks." He set the cup down with more force than necessary. "You've been here almost a week. You need things. Supplies, clothes. And Lila could use an outing. People will talk." "They're already talking." He met her eyes. "Might as well give them something real to talk about." Evelyn's heart hammered. "What does that mean?" "It means I'm tired of hiding, tired of pretending you're not." He stopped, regrouped. "You're part of this household now. People need to accept that." "I'm temporary," Evelyn said, but the words felt hollow. "Right, temporary." Caleb's expression was unreadable. "So are we going to town or not?" Evelyn thought about refusing, about keeping her head down, avoiding attention, not making waves. Then she thought about Lila's smile, about warm bread and clean floors and the first place in years where she'd felt like she mattered. "We'll go," she said. The ride into Arroyo Seco the next morning felt different from that first desperate arrival. Evelyn sat in the wagon between Caleb and Lila, the morning sun warm on her face, dust rising from the wheels in familiar clouds. Lila leaned against her side, pointing out landmarks with the enthusiasm of a tour guide. "That's where the old Miller place burned down. And that tree there, that's where I saw a hawk catch a rabbit. And over there—" "Lila," Caleb said mildly, "give Miss Evelyn's ears a rest." "It's fine," Evelyn said, though her stomach was twisting itself into knots. The closer they got to town, the more real this became. She was about to walk into Arroyo Seco as Caleb Cross's hired help, about to face whatever judgment waited there. The letter to Thomas Whitmore sat in her pocket, sealed and ready to post. Final. The town looked different in full daylight. Still small, still rough around the edges, but more alive. A few wagons lined the main street. People moved between the buildings. The general store's door stood open, and Evelyn could hear the murmur of conversation from inside. Caleb pulled the wagon up in front of the store. Before he could help her down, Lila had already scrambled out and grabbed Evelyn's hand. "Come on! Mr. Pete keeps peppermint sticks behind the counter. If you're nice, he gives you one." "I'm sure Mr. Pete has better things to do than hand out candy," Evelyn said, but she let herself be pulled along. The inside of the store smelled like coffee and leather, and something indefinably masculine. Shelves lined the walls, packed with goods. A few customers browsed, their conversations dying when Evelyn entered. Pete stood behind the counter, the same weathered man who'd watched her arrive that first day. His eyebrows rose slightly when he saw her. Then his gaze shifted to Caleb. "Morning, Caleb. Miss Hartley." "Pete." Caleb's voice was carefully neutral. "Need to pick up some supplies. And Miss Hartley needs a few things." The weight of unspoken questions hung in the air. Pete's eyes moved from Caleb to Evelyn to Lila, who was still gripping Evelyn's hand like a lifeline. "I'll help you find what you need," Pete said finally. "Dry goods are in the back. Fabric's on the side wall there." Evelyn felt the eyes on her as she moved through the store. Two women near the fabric display stopped talking mid-sentence. A man by the hardware section made no effort to hide his staring. "Just ignore them," Caleb said quietly, appearing at her elbow. "They'll get used to it." "Will they?" "Eventually." He didn't sound convinced. Evelyn selected what she needed. Basic supplies. Some fabric for a new dress since she'd been wearing the same travel-worn clothes for over a week. Nothing extravagant. She was keenly aware of every penny, even though Caleb had told her to get whatever she required. At the counter, Pete tallied up the purchases. "That'll be $8.40. Caleb counted out the money without hesitation. As Pete wrapped the goods, he cleared his throat. "Heard you hired some help out at the ranch." "News travels fast," Caleb said dryly. "Always does." Pete's tone was carefully neutral. "Must be a help, having someone to look after the house. And Lila." "It is." The conversation was stilted, both men dancing around what they really wanted to say. Evelyn focused on Lila, who'd wandered over to look at the peppermint sticks with longing eyes. "Go ahead," Evelyn told her quietly. "Pick one." Lila's face lit up. She selected a stick with the gravity of someone choosing diamonds, then clutched it to her chest like treasure. The door opened behind them. Evelyn turned and felt her stomach drop. Mrs. Patterson swept in like a storm front, two other women flanking her like attendants. All three wore expressions of barely concealed disapproval. "Caleb," Mrs. Patterson said, her voice sugary and sharp at once. "How nice to see you in town, and with your whole household, I see." The emphasis on household was deliberate. Evelyn felt Caleb tense beside her. "Margaret," his voice was flat, "didn't expect to see you here today." "Oh, I'm here every Thursday. You know that." Mrs. Patterson's eyes swept over Evelyn with obvious judgment. "Miss Hartley, isn't it? Settling in well, I trust?" "Well enough, thank you." "How fortunate for you, finding employment so quickly after your unfortunate arrival." The pause was pointed. "Though I must say, the arrangement is quite unusual." One of the other women tittered. Evelyn felt heat climb her neck, but kept her expression neutral. "Nothing unusual about hiring help," Caleb said. His voice had gone hard. "Plenty of ranchers do it." "Oh, certainly. Though usually they hire a housekeeper of more appropriate age. Someone widowed, perhaps. Less likely to cause talk." Mrs. Patterson's smile didn't reach her eyes. "But I'm sure you had your reasons." The implication hung in the air like smoke. Evelyn saw Lila's grip tighten on her peppermint stick, the girl's face going pale. "My reasons are my own business," Caleb said quietly, "and I don't recall asking for your opinion on them." "No, of course not. I'm merely concerned for propriety, for Lila's sake." Mrs. Patterson looked at the girl with false sympathy. "A child needs proper influences. Stable ones, not some stranger who showed up out of nowhere." "Miss Evelyn's not a stranger," Lila said suddenly, her voice trembling but defiant. "She's nice. She's helping us, and you're being mean." "Lila Cross, mind your tongue." "No." Caleb's voice cut through like a knife. "You don't get to tell my daughter how to speak. especially when you're standing in this store insulting someone who's done nothing to deserve it. Mrs. Patterson's face flushed. I'm trying to help you see. I see just fine. What I see is a woman who can't mind her own business, who thinks she has the right to judge how other people live their lives. Caleb picked up their wrapped packages, his movements deliberate. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have things to do. He ushered Evelyn and Lila toward the door. Behind them, Evelyn heard Mrs. Patterson's voice, pitched to Carrie. Well, I suppose we'll see how long this arrangement lasts. Usually these things end in scandal. Poor Lila, caught in the middle of it all. Evelyn's steps faltered. Caleb's hand found the small of her back, gentle but firm, propelling her forward. Outside, the morning sun felt too bright. Evelyn's hands were shaking as she helped load the packages into the wagon. I'm sorry, Caleb said quietly. I should have known she'd be there. Should have. It's not your fault, isn't it? He looked at her, something raw in his expression. She's right about one thing. This does look bad. For you, especially. Evelyn thought about the letter in her pocket, about reputation and propriety and all the careful rules women had to follow, about how easily a life could be ruined by gossip. I don't care, she heard herself say. Caleb's eyes widened slightly. I don't care what Mrs. Patterson thinks. Or anyone else. The words came out fierce. I'm doing honest work, caring for a child who needs me. If people want to make that into something ugly, that's their problem, not mine. Lila threw her arms around Evelyn's waist. See, Daddy? I told you Miss Evelyn was brave. Caleb's expression did something complicated. Yeah, he said softly. Yeah, she is. They climbed into the wagon. As Caleb turned the horses toward home, Evelyn caught sight of Mrs. Patterson in the store window, watching them leave. The woman's face was set in hard lines of disapproval. A warning, Evelyn thought, or a threat. The ride back was quieter. Lila munched her peppermint stick, swinging her legs. Caleb stared at the road ahead, his jaw tight. She's going to make trouble, Evelyn said finally. She can try. What if she goes to the territorial authorities, claims the arrangement is improper, that Lila's in an unsuitable environment? Caleb's hands tightened on the reins. On what grounds? The house is clean. Lila's fed and cared for. There's nothing improper happening. That won't matter if people believe there is. The wagon hit a rut. They all jolted. Lila steadied herself against Evelyn's arm, then went back to her candy, apparently unconcerned. What do you want me to do? Caleb asked. His voice was rough. Fire you? Send you away? Let Lila go back to barely eating and crying herself to sleep every night? No, Evelyn stopped. What did she want? I don't know. They rode in silence for a while. The ranch came into view, the house standing solid against the endless sky. My wife died 8 months ago, Caleb said suddenly. And for 8 months people have been telling me what I should do, how I should grieve, when I should move on. Margaret Patterson showed up at the funeral and told me I'd need to remarry within the year. For Lila's sake, she said. His voice was bitter. Like Sarah's body wasn't even cold yet. Evelyn's chest ached. I'm sorry. Everyone's sorry. But sorry doesn't help. Sorry doesn't bring Sarah back. Sorry doesn't make Lila stop asking when her mama's coming home. He pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the house, but didn't move to get down. You know what does help? Coming home to a clean house. To food that doesn't taste like ash. To my daughter smiling again. He turned to look at her, his eyes dark and intense. So no, I don't care what Margaret Patterson thinks. I don't care if people talk. Because for the first time in 8 months, things are better, and I'm not going to apologize for that. Lila had fallen asleep against Evelyn's side, worn out from the excitement and the sugar. Evelyn carefully shifted her weight, cradling the girl's head. What if it's not enough? She asked quietly. What if Mrs. Patterson finds a way to take Lila anyway? Then I'll fight her. Caleb's voice was steel. I'll fight anyone who tries to take my daughter from me. He climbed down and came around to help with Lila. The girl barely stirred as he lifted her, carrying her toward the house with the ease of long practice. Evelyn sat in the wagon for a moment, watching them, father and daughter, silhouetted against the house. A family that had been broken and was trying desperately to heal. And somehow, She'd become part of that healing, whether she'd meant to or not. Inside, Caleb laid Lila on her bed. The girl curled immediately into a ball, clutching her half-eaten peppermint stick. "She'll wake up sticky," Evelyn murmured. "Won't be the first time." Caleb tucked a blanket around his daughter, his movements tender. "Won't be the last." They left Lila sleeping and went back downstairs. Evelyn started putting away the supplies they'd bought, falling into the rhythm of the work. Caleb helped without being asked, handing her items, finding places for things. It felt domestic, comfortable, dangerous. "I need to tell you something," Evelyn said before she could lose her nerve. She pulled the letter from her pocket. "I wrote to Thomas Whitmore, the man I was supposed to marry. I told him I wouldn't be coming to Cedar Falls." Caleb went very still. "You did?" "This morning. I was going to post it in town, but—" She gestured vaguely. "Everything else happened." "Why?" His voice was carefully neutral. "Why tell him no?" Evelyn set the letter on the table between them. "Because I'm here. Because Lila needs me. Because—" She stopped, searching for words. "Because this feels right, even though it's messy and complicated and probably a terrible idea." "Probably," Caleb agreed. But he was looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "I don't want you to think—" Evelyn started, then stopped. What didn't she want him to think? That she had expectations? That she was angling for something more permanent? "I'm still just here to help, temporarily." "This doesn't change that." "Right, temporarily." He picked up the letter, turned it over in his hands. "How long were you planning to stay temporarily?" "I don't know. Until what? Until she figured out her next move? Until she saved enough money to go somewhere else? Until Lila didn't need her anymore?" The truth was, she hadn't thought that far ahead. She'd been taking it one day at a time, letting herself be pulled along by the current of this unexpected life. "Until it doesn't work anymore, I guess," she finished lamely. Caleb set the letter back down. "And what if it keeps working?" Her heart kicked. "What? What if it keeps working? What if a week turns into a month, turns into longer? What then?" "I don't—" Evelyn's throat was dry. "I don't understand what you're asking." "I think you do." They stood in the kitchen, the afternoon light slanting through the windows, the house quiet around them. Evelyn could hear her own heartbeat, loud in her ears. "Caleb," she said carefully, "you're grieving. You're overwhelmed. You're grateful for the help, but that doesn't mean—" "Doesn't mean what?" "That this is anything more than what it is. A practical arrangement, temporary help. I'm not—" She gestured helplessly. "I'm not a replacement for what you lost." "I know that." His voice was rough. "You think I don't know that? Every morning I wake up and for half a second I forget Sarah's gone. And then I remember. Every single day I remember." Evelyn's eyes stung. "I'm sorry." "Stop apologizing." He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "That's not what I'm trying to say. I'm not asking you to replace Sarah. I couldn't even if I wanted to. She was—" He stopped, his voice breaking slightly. "She was everything." "I know. But you're not nothing either." He looked at her, his eyes dark and honest. "You showed up out of nowhere, and you made things better. You made Lila smile. You made the house feel like a home again. And I don't know what that means or where it goes, but I know I don't want it to stop." Evelyn's hands trembled. She gripped the edge of the table to steady herself. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe temporary doesn't have to be temporary. Maybe—" He stopped, seeming to struggle with the words. "Maybe we could figure out something more permanent, if you wanted." Her heart was racing now, her thoughts spinning. "Like what?" "I don't know. I haven't thought it through, but you need a place to be. And Lila needs—" He gestured helplessly. "She needs you. And I—" He stopped again, looking away. "I'm not ready for anything complicated. But what we have now, what we're doing, it works. So maybe we just keep doing it, officially." "Officially how?" The question hung between them. Caleb met her eyes, and in that moment, Evelyn saw him clearly. A man barely holding himself together. A father desperate to do right by his daughter. Someone as lost as she was, trying to find solid ground. Before either of them could say anything else, Footsteps thundered on the stairs. Lila appeared, her hair wild, her face flushed from sleep. "I had a bad dream," she announced. Then she saw them standing there, caught the tension in the air. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong, sweetheart," Evelyn said automatically, moving toward the girl. "Just grown-up talk." "About me?" "Everything's about you," Caleb said, managing a smile. "You're the most important person in this house." Lila looked between them, her expression suspicious but softening. "Can we have the rest of the peppermint stick?" "After dinner," Evelyn said, "and after you wash your face. You've got sugar all over it." The girl ran off to the wash basin, leaving them alone again. But the moment had passed. Whatever they'd been circling around, whatever Caleb had been about to say, it dissolved into the ordinary rhythm of the afternoon. They made dinner together, the three of them. Lila chattered about her dream, something involving chickens and a dragon, the details confused but enthusiastic. Caleb listened with patient attention. Evelyn moved around the kitchen, preparing food, setting the table, falling into a role that felt both foreign and natural. After they ate, Lila begged for a story. Evelyn found herself in the girls' room, sitting on the edge of the bed, making up tales about brave princesses and clever girls who saved themselves. "Tell the one about the girl who got lost," Lila requested, snuggling into her pillow. "Which one is that?" "You know, the one where she gets on the wrong train and ends up somewhere better than where she was going." Evelyn's throat closed. "I don't think I know that one." "Yes, you do. It's your story." Lila's eyes were already drooping. "You got lost and found us, and now everything's better." "Is it?" Evelyn smoothed the hair back from the girl's forehead. "Is everything better?" Way better, because you're here." Lila's words were slurring with sleep. "Don't leave, okay? Promise you won't leave." "I promise," Evelyn whispered, the words automatic. Another promise to a child who'd lost too much. Lila's breathing deepened, her small body relaxing into sleep. Evelyn sat there for a long time, just watching her. This fierce, funny, heartbroken girl who'd grabbed onto a stranger and decided she was worth keeping. When she finally went downstairs, she found Caleb on the porch again, his usual spot. He looked up as she approached. "She asleep?" Finally, Evelyn leaned against the railing, looking out at the darkening land. "She asked me to promise I wouldn't leave." "What did you say?" "I promised." Caleb was quiet for a moment. "You shouldn't make promises you can't keep." "Who says I can't keep it?" He turned to look at her, his expression unreadable in the dim light. "Earlier, when I said we should make this official, I wasn't—" He stopped, started again. "I wasn't asking you to marry me, in case you thought that's what I meant." Evelyn's stomach dropped, though she wasn't sure if it was relief or disappointment. "I didn't think that." "Good. Because I can't." He struggled with the words. "Sarah's only been gone 8 months, and I still—" His voice broke. "I still love her. Every day I wake up, and I still love her." "I know," Evelyn said softly. "And you should. You should love her for as long as you need to. But Lila needs stability, and the ranch needs—" He gestured helplessly. "And you need a future that's not just temporary work. So what are you suggesting?" "I don't know." He sounded defeated. "I just know that what we have now is the best thing that's happened since Sarah died, and I don't want to lose it. But I also don't know how to make it work long-term without making it something it's not," Evelyn finished. "Yeah." They stood in the darkness, two people caught between grief and need and something neither of them was ready to name. "What if we just—" Evelyn started, then stopped. The idea forming in her head was probably insane. But then again, hadn't everything about this situation been insane from the start? "What if we just keep going like we are?" she said. "No promises beyond what we've already made, no expectations, just this, for as long as it works." "That's what we're already doing." "I know, but maybe we stop worrying about making it official, stop trying to define it. Just let it be what it is." Caleb studied her face. "And when people ask? When Mrs. Patterson pushes? When the gossip gets worse? Then we tell them the truth, that you hired help, that I'm earning my keep, That whatever they want to make of it is their problem, not ours. You make it sound simple. It could be. Evelyn met his eyes. If we let it. He looked at her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. Then he nodded slowly. All right, we'll try it your way. Relief washed over Evelyn, followed quickly by something that felt dangerously like hope. They were still dancing around the real issue, still avoiding the deeper questions. But maybe that was okay. Maybe some things didn't need to be defined to be real. The next few days passed quietly. Evelyn fell deeper into the rhythm of the household, learning its quirks and patterns. She discovered that Caleb took his coffee black and bitter, that he was left-handed, that he sang under his breath when he thought no one was listening. She learned that Lila was afraid of thunderstorms and the dark spot in the barn where a rat had once appeared, that the girl could recite entire conversations from memory and had opinions on everything from the correct way to fold napkins to whether chickens were smarter than horses. She learned that Sarah had loved gardening, that there was a plot behind the house gone to weeds now, that she'd made her own soap and had a recipe for apple pie that Caleb still talked about with a catch in his voice. And slowly, carefully, Evelyn started to carve out her own space in this household. Not replacing Sarah, she'd never do that, but existing alongside her memory, finding room for both grief and new life. On the 6th day, as she kneaded bread with Lila chattering beside her, hoofbeats approached the house. Evelyn looked up to see a wagon pulling into the yard, unfamiliar. Caleb emerged from the barn, his expression wary. Evelyn wiped her hands and moved to the window, Lila pressing against her side. A man climbed down from the wagon, tall, well-dressed, with the bearing of someone used to authority. He spoke to Caleb, gesturing. Even from inside, Evelyn could see Caleb's shoulders tense. "Who's that?" Lila whispered. "I don't know, sweetheart." The conversation outside grew heated. The stranger's voice rose, then Caleb's. Evelyn's stomach knotted. Finally, Caleb turned and walked toward the house, his face like thunder. The stranger followed. They came through the door, and up close, Evelyn could see the stranger's expensive suit, his carefully groomed appearance. He looked out of place in the rough kitchen. "Miss Hartley," Caleb said, his voice tight. "This is Marcus Brennan. He's a territorial judge. He's here about Lila." Evelyn's blood went cold. She moved instinctively, putting herself between the judge and the child. "What about Lila?" she asked, keeping her voice steady. Judge Brennan looked at her with cool assessment. "I've received a complaint regarding the child's living situation, allegations of impropriety, an unsuitable environment." "For Mrs. Patterson," Evelyn said flatly. "The source is irrelevant. What matters is the welfare of the child." His eyes swept the kitchen, the bread rising on the counter, the clean floors, Lila standing close to Evelyn. "I'm here to assess whether Miss Cross is being properly cared for." "She is," Caleb said, his voice hard as stone. "She's fed. She's clean. She's safe." "And what is Miss Hartley's exact role in this household?" The question hung in the air like a blade. Evelyn felt Lila's small hand slip into hers, trembling. This was it. The moment she'd been dreading, where everything they'd built in the past week would be judged, weighed, potentially destroyed. She looked at Caleb, at Lila, at the home they'd created together from broken pieces, and something fierce rose in her chest, something protective and defiant and absolutely certain. "I'm the person who's keeping this family together," Evelyn said, her voice clear and strong. "And unless you have a legal reason to take this child from a father who loves her, I suggest you leave." Judge Brennan's eyebrows rose. Behind him, through the window, Evelyn saw another wagon approaching. Mrs. Patterson had arrived, her face set in grim satisfaction. The battle was about to begin. Mrs. Patterson swept through the door like she owned the place, 2 women trailing behind her as witnesses. Her eyes went straight to Lila, then to Evelyn's hand clasped around the child's, and her mouth tightened with satisfaction. "Judge Brennan," she said, her voice dripping false concern, "thank you for coming so quickly. As you can see, the situation is exactly as I described." "What situation?" Caleb's voice was dangerously quiet. "A clean house, a fed child, a family going about their business." "A family?" Mrs. Patterson's eyebrows arched. "Is that what you're calling this arrangement now?" Judge Brennan held up a hand. "Mrs. Patterson, please, I'll conduct my own assessment." He turned to Caleb. Mr. Cross, I understand you hired Miss Hartley as household help approximately 1 week ago. Is that correct? It is. And she resides here? Under your roof? She has a room upstairs, same as any hired help would. Except most hired help aren't young, unmarried women living alone with widowed men, Mrs. Patterson interjected. It's unseemly, improper. The entire town is talking about it. Let them talk, Caleb said. It's not just talk. Mrs. Patterson's voice sharpened. It's about what's right for this child. Lila needs a proper home, proper guidance, not some woman who appeared out of nowhere playing house with her father. Evelyn felt Lila's hand tighten painfully in hers. The girl was trembling, her breath coming fast and shallow. Lila, Judge Brennan said, his tone gentling slightly. Would you come here, please? No. The word came out small but firm. I just want to ask you a few questions. She doesn't have to answer anything, Evelyn said. She's a child. She's frightened. Can't you see that? Which is precisely the problem, Mrs. Patterson said. The child is confused, attached to a stranger. It's not healthy. She's not a stranger, Lila's voice rose, cracking. She's Miss Evelyn, and she's nice, and she makes bread, and she... Tears spilled over. Don't let them take me away, Daddy. Please don't let them. Caleb crossed the kitchen in 3 strides and dropped to his knees in front of his daughter. His hands were shaking as he cupped her face. No one's taking you anywhere, he said, his voice rough. You hear me? No one. Mr. Cross, threats won't help your case, Judge Brennan said. It's not a threat. It's a fact. Caleb stood, pulling Lila against his side. My daughter is fed, clothed, educated, and loved. This house is clean and well-maintained. There's nothing improper happening under this roof. If Mrs. Patterson has evidence to the contrary, let her present it. Otherwise, this is harassment. Judge Brennan's expression remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. He walked slowly around the kitchen, taking in the fresh bread, the scrubbed floor, the neatly organized shelves. He paused at the table where Lila's schoolwork sat in a careful stack. The child attends school, he asked. When it's in session, Caleb said, and Miss Hartley's been helping with her reading in the meantime. Miss Hartley is educated, then? I was a governess before coming west, Evelyn said, finding her voice. I can provide references if needed. From where? St. Louis. The Ashford family employed me for 2 years before they relocated to Boston. It wasn't entirely true. She'd only worked for the Ashfords for 18 months, and they'd let her go, not relocated, but close enough. And Mrs. Patterson didn't need to know the details. Judge Brennan made a note in a small book he'd produced from his pocket. And you came west for what purpose, Miss Hartley? The question hung in the air. Evelyn felt Mrs. Patterson's eyes on her, waiting for her to stumble. I came west seeking employment, Evelyn said carefully. There was a position advertised in Cedar Falls, but due to a mix-up with the train schedule, I ended up in Arroyo Seco instead. Mr. Cross offered me work. I accepted. How convenient, Mrs. Patterson murmured. Convenient for everyone, Evelyn shot back. Mr. Cross needed help managing his household. I needed employment. It's a simple business arrangement. Living under the same roof, caring for his child, breaking bread together every night. Mrs. Patterson's voice was silk over steel. If it's such a simple business arrangement, why not hire someone local, someone with ties to the community, someone whose reputation could withstand scrutiny? Because no one local wanted the job, Caleb said flatly. You know that as well as I do, Margaret. After Sarah died, 6 women came by offering help, but what they really wanted was to take over. To replace Sarah before her grave was cold, to turn my home into their home. And you think this stranger is any different? Mrs. Patterson's gesture toward Evelyn was almost violent. You think she doesn't have designs on becoming the next Mrs. Cross? What I think, Caleb said, his voice like granite, is that Miss Hartley has been nothing but respectful and professional. She's helped my daughter heal. She's kept this household running. And whether you approve or not is irrelevant. It's not irrelevant when the child's welfare is at stake. Mrs. Patterson turned to Judge Brennan. I have witnesses who can attest to the impropriety of this situation. 3 people saw them in town together last week, looking for all the world like a courting couple. The girl was clinging to Miss Hartley like a child who's found someone she trusts, Evelyn interrupted. Which is exactly what happened. I'm sorry if that offends your sensibilities, Mrs. Patterson, but Lila needed someone, and I was there. Precisely my point. You were convenient, available, and you've taken advantage of a grieving man and his vulnerable daughter. The accusation hit like a slap. Evelyn felt her face flush hot, then cold. That's not true, isn't it? You showed up with nothing, no prospects, no future. And within days, you've installed yourself in a ready-made home with a man who's not thinking clearly. If that's not taking advantage, I don't know what is. Enough. Judge Brennan's voice cut through the rising tension. Mrs. Patterson, your concerns are noted. However, I need to conduct an objective assessment, which means I need to speak with the child. Alone. No, Caleb said immediately. Mr. Cross, I can do this the easy way or the hard way, but either way, I will speak with your daughter. Then I want Miss Hartley present. Judge Brennan considered this. All right. But you and Mrs. Patterson will wait outside. Like hell I will. Those are my terms, Mr. Cross. Take them or I'll have the territorial marshal remove you from the premises and conduct a full investigation. Your choice. Caleb looked at Evelyn. In his eyes, she saw fear and fury and desperate hope all tangled together. She gave him a small nod. It'll be all right, she said, with more confidence than she felt. He left slowly, every step reluctant. Mrs. Patterson followed with obvious displeasure, her witnesses trailing behind. The door closed, leaving Evelyn and Lila alone with the judge. The kitchen suddenly felt very small. Judge Brennan pulled out a chair and sat down, gesturing for them to do the same. Lila climbed into the chair next to Evelyn's, her small body pressed as close as possible. Lila, the judge said, his tone gentle now. I'm not here to hurt you. I just want to make sure you're safe and happy. Can you answer some questions for me? The girl nodded, mute. How do you like living here? I like it. Her voice was barely a whisper. And Miss Evelyn? How do you feel about her? Lila's hand found Evelyn's under the table. I like her too. Your father says she helps with your schoolwork. Is that true? Yes, sir. She's teaching me to read better. And to do sums, and she tells stories. What kind of stories? About brave girls. And people who get lost and find their way home. Lila's voice strengthened slightly. She's nice to me. She doesn't yell, and she makes really good bread. Despite everything, Judge Brennan's mouth twitched. I can see that. Do you feel safe here, Lila? Yes, sir. Has anyone ever hurt you? Your father? Miss Evelyn? No. Lila looked shocked. Daddy would never hurt me. And Miss Evelyn... She turned to look at Evelyn, her eyes bright. Miss Evelyn makes things better. Before she came, everything was sad. But now it's not so sad anymore. Judge Brennan made another note. I see. And before Miss Evelyn came, how are things? Lila's face crumpled slightly. Daddy tried really hard, but he was sad too, and the house was quiet all the time, and Her voice dropped. I miss Mama. I still miss Mama. Of course you do. Judge Brennan's tone softened further. That's very normal. Now, one more question. If you could choose, would you want to stay here with your father and Miss Evelyn, or would you like to try living somewhere else? Maybe with a family that has a mother and father, both? Evelyn's heart stopped. She felt Lila's grip tighten painfully. I want to stay here, Lila said, her voice rising. This is my home, Daddy's here, and Miss Evelyn's here. I don't want to go anywhere else. Even if that somewhere else might be easier, more proper? I don't care about proper. And tears spilled over now. I care about Daddy and Miss Evelyn and home. Please don't make me leave, please. Judge Brennan set down his pencil. He looked at Lila for a long moment, then at Evelyn. Miss Hartley, he said quietly, a word outside, if you please. Evelyn's stomach dropped. Lila should... We'll be fine for 2 minutes, I promise. Evelyn stood on shaking legs. She bent down and kissed the top of Lila's head. I'll be right back, sweetheart. Right back. Outside, the afternoon sun was too bright. Caleb stood by the porch railing, his fists clenched. Mrs. Patterson hovered nearby, her expression eager. Judge Brennan closed the door and turned to Evelyn. Miss Hartley, I'm going to be direct with you. What exactly is your relationship with Mr. Cross? I'm his employee. Nothing more? Nothing more. And you have no designs on becoming anything more? No hopes of marriage? The question cut deep, because the truth was complicated. The truth was that somewhere in the past week, Evelyn had started imagining a future here, had started feeling like she belonged, had started caring about Caleb Cross as more than just an employer, but saying that now, with Mrs. Patterson watching like a hawk and a judge who could take Lila away, that would destroy everything. I have no expectations beyond my current employment, Evelyn said carefully. Mr. Cross is grieving his wife. I respect that. I'm here to help his household run smoothly. That's all. That's a lie, Mrs. Patterson burst out. Anyone with eyes can see. Mrs. Patterson, please. Judge Brennan held up a hand. He studied Evelyn's face. You understand that the appearance of impropriety can be just as damaging as actual impropriety? I do. And you understand that a child's welfare must come before any adult's convenience? Of course. Then you'll understand what I'm about to propose. He took a breath. Mr. Cross, Miss Hartley, I'm prepared to allow the current arrangement to continue, temporarily. Relief flooded through Evelyn. Beside her, Caleb's shoulders dropped. However, the judge continued, there are conditions. First, you will make the arrangement more official, either through legal guardianship papers naming Miss Hartley as an authorized caretaker, or, he paused, or through marriage. The word hung in the air like a bomb. Marriage. Caleb's voice was strangled. It would resolve all questions of propriety, give Miss Hartley legal standing in the household, provide stability for the child. Judge Brennan's expression was neutral. It doesn't have to be a love match. Marriages of convenience are common enough in the territories, but it would protect all of you from further scrutiny. You can't be serious, Evelyn breathed. I'm quite serious. The alternative is that I remove Lila from this home pending a full investigation, which could take months, during which time she'd be placed with, he glanced at Mrs. Patterson, a suitable family, temporarily, of course. Over my dead body, Caleb said. Then marry Miss Hartley, or draw up legal papers, but make it official within the week. Otherwise, I'll have no choice but to intervene. Mrs. Patterson's face had gone red. This is absurd. You're rewarding their impropriety. I'm ensuring a child's welfare, Judge Brennan said coolly, which is my job. Now, Mr. Cross, Miss Hartley, do we have an understanding? Evelyn couldn't speak, couldn't think. Marriage. To a man she'd known for barely a week? A man still in love with his dead wife. It was insane. But the alternative was losing Lila. Was watching that little girl be torn from her home, from her father, from everything familiar. We understand, Caleb said, his voice hollow. Good. I'll expect documentation within 7 days. Legal papers or a marriage certificate. Your choice. Judge Brennan tipped his hat. Good day to you both. He left, climbing into his wagon. Mrs. Patterson lingered, her expression caught between fury and triumph. This isn't over, she said. Marriage or no marriage, I'll be watching. And the moment you step out of line, get off my property, Caleb said quietly. Now. She left in a cloud of dust and indignation, her witnesses scrambling after her. Silence fell over the yard. Evelyn stood frozen, her mind racing. Marriage, to Caleb Cross. To make it official. To protect Lila. To trap herself in a life she'd never planned. Evelyn, Caleb started. I need to think. She turned toward the house. I can't. Hey! His hand caught her arm, gentle but firm. I'm not going to force you into anything. You understand that? If you want to leave, if this is too much... And what happens to Lila if I leave? Evelyn's voice cracked. She gets taken away? Put with strangers? While you fight it out in court? I'll find another way. There is no other way. The words burst out, sharp with frustration and fear. You heard him. Legal papers or marriage. Those are the options. Then we'll do the papers. Guardianship. Whatever's needed. And if that's not enough? If Mrs. Patterson challenges it? If the judge decides it's not sufficient? Evelyn pulled away from him, wrapping her arms around herself. She was right about one thing. I am convenient. I showed up at exactly the right moment to solve all your problems. And now I'm supposed to marry you to make it legal. I never asked you to. I know you didn't. Evelyn's eyes stung. But here we are anyway. The door creaked. Lila appeared, her face blotchy from crying. Are they gone? She asked. They're gone, sweetheart, Caleb said. Are you fighting? Lila looked between them, her expression fearful. Are you mad at each other? No, Evelyn said automatically. We're figuring things out. The judge said you have to get married. Lila's voice was small. I heard him through the door. Is that true? Caleb and Evelyn exchanged a look. There was no point lying, the child had heard. It's complicated, Caleb said. But you could do it, right? Get married. Then Mrs. Patterson couldn't take me away. Then we could stay together. Hope bloomed in Lila's face. You like each other, I can tell. And Daddy needs someone. And Miss Evelyn needs a home. So it would work. It could work. The childish logic was both heartbreaking and terrifying because it wasn't entirely wrong. They did like each other, and Evelyn did need a home. And Caleb did need help. But marriage? That was something else entirely. Lila, go inside, Caleb said gently. Give us a few minutes. But please, sweetheart, just a few minutes. The girl left reluctantly. Through the window, Evelyn could see her hovering near the table, clearly trying to listen. Caleb rubbed his face with both hands. This is a mess. Yeah. I can't ask you to do this. It's not fair. Nothing about this situation has been fair, Evelyn said, from the moment I got off that train. Then go, right to that man in Cedar Falls. Tell him you're coming after all. I'll figure something else out. Evelyn looked at the house, at the window where Lila watched, at this place that had become, against all odds, something like home. I already wrote to him, she said quietly. Remember? I told him I wasn't coming. You could write again. Explain. And what? Show up on his doorstep and say, sorry for the delay, I was busy pretending to be someone else's family? Evelyn shook her head. That ship has sailed. Then what do you want to do? That was the question, wasn't it? What did she want? Evelyn thought about her options. She could leave, find work somewhere else, start over yet again. But where? With what money? And leaving would mean abandoning Lila, which felt impossible now. She could stay as hired help and hope the legal papers were enough. But Mrs. Patterson would never stop pushing, would find ways to make trouble, to question the arrangement, to threaten Lila's stability. Or she could marry Caleb Cross, make it official, give Lila the protection she needed, trade her uncertain future for a certain present, a marriage of convenience. People did it all the time out here. Practical arrangements, partnerships. It didn't have to mean love or romance or any of the things marriage usually implied. It just had to mean commitment, stability, a legal bond that would shut Mrs. Patterson up and keep Lila safe. If we did this, Evelyn said slowly, if we got married, it would be a business arrangement, nothing more. Caleb's expression was carefully neutral. Agreed. Separate rooms, no expectations of... She stopped, feeling heat climb her neck. Of anything beyond what we're already doing. Of course. And if it doesn't work, if one of us wants out, then we figure it out then, Caleb said. But right now, the question is whether we do this at all. Evelyn looked at him, really looked at him. This man who'd taken her in when she had nowhere else to go, who'd trusted her with his daughter, who'd defended her against Mrs. Patterson's accusations, who was still grieving his wife but trying desperately to move forward anyway. She thought about Lila, whose whole world had already been shattered once, who couldn't survive losing everything again. She thought about herself, alone, adrift, looking for a place to matter. And she thought about that first day when Lila had grabbed her hand and called her mama, when Evelyn had promised to stay, just for a while, except a while had turned into something bigger, something that mattered, something worth protecting. All right, Evelyn heard herself say. We'll do it. Caleb's eyes widened. You're sure? No, but I'm doing it anyway. She met his gaze. For Lila. To keep her safe. For Lila, he echoed. Then quieter. Thank you. They stood there in the afternoon sun, Two people who just agreed to bind their lives together for the most unromantic reasons possible. It should have felt wrong, forced. Instead, it felt like the only choice that made sense. "We should tell her," Evelyn said. They went inside together. Lila was exactly where Evelyn expected, pressed against the wall near the door, her face anxious. "Were you listening?" Caleb asked. "Maybe." The girl bit her lip. "Are you mad?" "No." He crouched down in front of her. "But we need to talk to you about something important. Come sit." They gathered at the kitchen table, the same table where they'd eaten together every night for the past week. Lila climbed into her chair, looking between them with barely contained hope. "The judge said we need to make some changes," Caleb started, "to make sure you can stay here, to make sure no one can take you away." "Like getting married?" Lila's voice rose with excitement. "Yes. Miss Evelyn and I are going to get married." The girl's face lit up like sunrise. "Really? You mean it?" "We mean it," Evelyn said. "But, Lila, you need to understand. It's not like when your mama and daddy got married. This is different." "How?" How to explain marriage of convenience to a 6-year-old. How to make her understand that this wasn't a fairy tale, that her father wasn't suddenly in love again, that Evelyn wasn't trying to replace her mother. "It's more like a partnership," Evelyn said carefully. "Your daddy and I are making a promise to work together, to take care of you, to keep this household running. But that doesn't mean I'm not trying to be your mama. I could never be her." "But you could be something," Lila said. Her voice was very small. "You could be Miss Evelyn, who lives here, who makes bread, who tells stories, who stays." Evelyn's throat closed. "Yes, I could be that. And we'd be a family? The three of us?" Caleb and Evelyn exchanged a look. The word family felt loaded, dangerous, full of implications neither of them was ready to face. "We'd be a household," Caleb said. "People who care about each other and live together. Is that enough?" Lila thought about this seriously. "Will you promise not to leave, either of you?" "I promise," Caleb said immediately. Evelyn hesitated. Promises were dangerous things. She'd already made too many she wasn't sure she could keep. But looking at Lila's hopeful face, at Caleb's steady gaze, at this life she'd stumbled into by accident, she found herself nodding. "I promise," she said. Lila threw herself at Evelyn, wrapping small arms around her waist. Thank you for staying." Evelyn held her tight, blinking back tears. Behind Lila, she saw Caleb watching them, his expression unreadable. What had she just agreed to? The rest of the day passed in a strange blur. They went through the motions of normal life: dinner, chores, bedtime. But everything felt different now, weighted with the future. After Lila was asleep, Evelyn and Caleb sat at the kitchen table trying to figure out logistics. "We'll go into town tomorrow," Caleb said. "File the paperwork. The Reverend can marry us in his office. Simple ceremony, just the legal minimum." "Should we tell anyone before we do it?" "Who would we tell?" Caleb's laugh was bitter. "My wife's been dead 8 months. Anyone I might have invited to a wedding is either gone or would judge me for moving on too fast." "Right, of course." Evelyn traced a pattern on the table with her finger. "So we just do it and deal with the aftermath. Mrs. Patterson's going to have a field day. Let her. We'll be legally married. She can't touch us then." Caleb looked at her across the table. "You really want to do this? Last chance to back out?" Did she want this? Evelyn wasn't sure want was the right word, but need, that was different. She needed a home. Lila needed protection. Caleb needed help. And maybe that was enough. Maybe wanting could come later. Or maybe it didn't have to come at all. "I'm not backing out," she said. "Are you?" "No." "Then we'll do it tomorrow." They sat in silence for a moment. Then Caleb said, "For what it's worth, I'll try to be a good husband, in whatever way that means for this kind of marriage. And I'll try to be a good wife, in whatever way that means." The words felt formal, like a contract being signed, which, in a way, it was. Caleb stood. "I should get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be, He stopped. "Long." "Yeah." He paused at the doorway. "Evelyn?" "Yes?" "Thank you for doing this, for her." For her, Evelyn echoed. He left. Evelyn sat alone in the kitchen, watching the lamp flicker. In less than 24 hours, she'd be married, to a man she barely knew, in a place she'd never meant to stay. The wrong station, the wrong train, the wrong life. So why did it feel like maybe, just maybe, it was starting to become the right one? Morning came too fast and too slow at the same time. Evelyn woke before dawn, her heart already racing. Today she would marry a stranger, a widower, a man whose house she'd been living in for barely more than a week. She dressed in her best clothes, which wasn't saying much. The same dress she'd worn to meet Thomas Whitmore, pressed as smooth as she could manage. Her hands shook as she pinned up her hair. In the mirror, her reflection looked pale, frightened. She forced herself to breathe. This was for Lila, to keep her safe. That was all. Downstairs, she found Caleb already up, dressed in what must have been his Sunday clothes. Dark trousers, a clean shirt, a vest that looked like it hadn't been worn in months. He stood at the stove, staring at the coffee pot like it held answers. Couldn't sleep? Evelyn asked. He turned. For a moment, they just looked at each other, two people about to make a promise neither of them had planned for. Not much, he admitted. You? Same. They moved around the kitchen in awkward silence, both pretending this was a normal morning. Evelyn made breakfast. Caleb set the table. The ordinary rituals felt absurd given what was about to happen. Lila appeared on the stairs, still in her nightgown, her hair a bird's nest. Is it today? She asked, her voice thick with sleep. Are you getting married today? Today, Caleb confirmed. The girl's face split into a grin. She ran down the stairs and threw her arms around both of them at once, trying to hug them together. This is the best day ever, she announced. Evelyn and Caleb's eyes met over Lila's head. Neither of them looked like they believed that. The ride into town was quiet. Lila chattered enough for all of them, talking about weddings she'd heard about, asking if there would be cake, wondering if Miss Evelyn would get a new dress. It's not that kind of wedding, sweetheart, Evelyn said gently. It's just a quick ceremony, just the legal part. Oh, Lila's face fell slightly, then brightened. But you'll still be married after. That's what matters. Arroyo Seco looked exactly the same as it had 2 days ago. The same dusty street, the same weathered buildings. But everything felt different now, more real, more permanent. Caleb helped them down from the wagon in front of a small building with a cross on top. The Reverend's office was attached to the side, a modest structure that looked like it might blow away in a strong wind. Wait here, Caleb said. I'll see if he's available. He went inside, leaving Evelyn and Lila standing in the street. A few people passed by, casting curious glances. Evelyn kept her chin up, refusing to look away. Caleb emerged a few minutes later. He can do it now. If you're ready. Ready? What a word. Evelyn would never be ready for this. Let's go, she said anyway. The Reverend was a thin man in his 60s with kind eyes and hands that trembled slightly. He looked between Caleb and Evelyn with something like concern. Mr. Cross, he said carefully. Are you certain about this? It's only been... I'm certain, Caleb cut him off. We need to do this. For Lila. The Reverend's gaze moved to the girl who stood holding Evelyn's hand, beaming. His expression softened. I see. Well then, do you have the license? They'd filed the paperwork that morning, a rush trip to the territorial office where a board clerk had processed their request without comment. Caleb handed over the document. The Reverend reviewed it, then gestured them toward a small altar. We'll keep it simple. Do you have rings? Evelyn's heart sank. She hadn't even thought about rings. No, Caleb said. We didn't. Here. The Reverend opened a drawer in a side table and pulled out 2 simple gold bands. These were my parents. My wife and I never had children to pass them to. You can borrow them for the ceremony, return them after if you like, or keep them. Consider it a gift. Evelyn's throat tightened. Such unexpected kindness from a stranger. Thank you, she managed. They stood before the altar. Lila positioned herself in front of them, watching with solemn attention. The Reverend opened a worn book. Dearly beloved, he began, then stopped. Actually, given the circumstances, perhaps we should skip to the vows, unless you'd prefer the full ceremony. The vows are fine, Caleb said. His voice was steady, but Evelyn could see the tension in his shoulders. Very well, Caleb Cross. Do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part? Caleb looked at Evelyn. In his eyes, she saw grief and gratitude and something that might have been apology. I do, he said. The Reverend turned to Evelyn. Evelyn Hartley, do you take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part? This was it, the moment. Once she said these words, there was no going back. She'd be Evelyn Cross, bound to this man, this child, this life she'd never planned. She thought about that first day on the platform, about Lila's small hands grabbing her skirt, about the promise she'd made to stay. I do, she said. Her voice didn't shake. That felt like a small victory. The Reverend handed them the rings. Caleb took Evelyn's hand, the first time they'd really touched beyond practical necessity. His palm was rough and warm. He slid the ring onto her finger. It was slightly too big, but it stayed. Evelyn took the other ring. Caleb's hand trembled slightly as she pushed it onto his finger. She wondered if he was thinking about the last time he'd worn a wedding band, about Sarah. By the power vested in me by the territory of New Mexico, the Reverend said, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride. Evelyn's eyes widened. She hadn't thought about that part. Caleb looked equally caught off guard. They stood there, frozen, while the Reverend watched expectantly, and Lila bounced on her toes with excitement. Finally, Caleb leaned forward and pressed a quick, chaste kiss to Evelyn's cheek. It was over in a second. Barely contact at all. But Evelyn felt it like a brand. Congratulations, the Reverend said warmly. I'll file the certificate with the territorial office. You're legally married as of this moment. Legally married. Evelyn Cross. It didn't feel real. They signed the paperwork in a daze. Lila signed as a witness, her letters careful and crooked. The Reverend offered them coffee, which they declined. Suddenly all Evelyn wanted was to be out of this small office, away from the weight of what they'd just done. Outside, the sun was higher now. The day was warming up. Everything looked exactly the same as when they'd gone inside. But everything had changed. We should go to the general store, Caleb said. Let Pete know, so he can tell anyone who asks. You want people to know? Better they hear it from us than through gossip. His jaw set. And I want the record to show we did this legally, before the judge's deadline. They walked to the store, Lila between them, holding both their hands. To anyone watching, they probably looked like a family, a married couple with their daughter. The thought made Evelyn's chest tight. Pete was behind the counter when they entered. His eyebrows rose when he saw them. Morning, folks. What can I... He stopped, his eyes catching on the ring on Evelyn's finger. Well, congratulations seem to be in order. We got married, Lila announced proudly, just now, at the Reverend's office. Did you now? Pete's expression was carefully neutral. That's quite the development. It's legal, Caleb said. Properly filed, in case anyone asks. Pete understood immediately. Mrs. Patterson's going to have thoughts. Letter. Caleb pulled out a list. We need some supplies, and I'd appreciate it if you mentioned the marriage to anyone who comes asking about our household situation. I can do that. Pete took the list, studying it. For what it's worth, Caleb, I think you made a good choice. Miss Hartley's been good for Lila. Anyone with eyes can see that. Mrs. Cross, Caleb corrected quietly. She's Mrs. Cross now. The name hit Evelyn like a physical thing. Mrs. Cross. Sarah had been Mrs. Cross. And now Evelyn was wearing that name like borrowed clothes. They gathered their supplies in silence. As Pete rang them up, the door opened. Evelyn's stomach dropped. Mrs. Patterson swept in, flanked by the same two women from before. She stopped dead when she saw them. Well, she said, her voice like ice, don't you all look cozy? Margaret, Caleb's tone was flat. Her eyes went to Evelyn's hand, to the ring there. Understanding dawned, followed by fury. You actually did it, she breathed. You married her. This morning, all legal and proper. Judge Brennan's deadline met with 5 days to spare. Mrs. Patterson's face went mottled red. You can't possibly think a week ago she was a stranger, and now she's your wife? Yes. It's indecent. It's a mockery of your marriage to Sarah. It's legal. Caleb cut her off. Which is all that matters. We're married. Lila has a stable home. End of discussion. The judge will never accept this. A rushed ceremony, a marriage of obvious convenience. The judge said legal papers or marriage. We chose marriage. Caleb's voice was steel. If you have a problem with that, take it up with him. Otherwise, stay out of my family's business. Your family? Mrs. Patterson's laugh was ugly. You've known this woman for 10 days. 11, Lila piped up. She's been here 11 days, and she's nice, and now she's staying forever. The simple conviction in the child's voice cut through the tension. Mrs. Patterson looked at Lila, then at Evelyn, then at Caleb. Her expression cycled through rage and frustration before settling on cold disdain. This isn't over, she said. Mark my words, Caleb Cross. This marriage is a sham and everyone knows it. You can't make something real just by signing papers. She left, her witnesses scurrying after her. The door slammed behind them. Silence fell over the store. Pete whistled low. She's not going to let this go easy, he said. Don't care, Caleb replied. We did what the judge required. She can't touch us now. But as they loaded the wagon and headed home, Evelyn couldn't shake Mrs. Patterson's words. You can't make something real just by signing papers. The woman was right, in a way. They'd signed papers, exchanged vows, put rings on their fingers. But none of that made them actually married, not in the way that mattered. They were still strangers playing house, still two broken people trying to protect a child, still living a lie, even if it was now a legal one. Back at the ranch, they fell into the routine of the day. Evelyn made lunch, Caleb tended to the horses. Lila played outside, singing to herself. Everything felt normal, except for the ring on Evelyn's finger, except for the way Caleb avoided looking directly at her, except for the weight of the vows they'd spoken settling over the household like dust. That evening, after Lila was in bed, Evelyn found Caleb on the porch, his usual spot. He was staring at the ring on his own finger, turning it slowly. Strange day, Evelyn said, sitting down beside him. Yeah. Do you regret it? He was quiet for a long time. I don't know. Do you? Evelyn thought about it honestly. I don't think so. We did what we had to do. For Lila. For Lila, he echoed. That's the only reason, right? What do you mean? Caleb looked at her finally. In the dim light, his expression was hard to read. I mean, did you agree to this just for her, or was there something else? Evelyn's heart hammered. What else would there be? I don't know. A home. Security. A future that's not just drifting. He paused. Me. The last word hung in the air. Evelyn's breath caught. I didn't marry you for romantic reasons, if that's what you're asking, she said carefully. We barely know each other. I know. But... She stopped. How to explain the complicated truth? But I didn't marry you just for Lila either, or just for security. I married you because this place feels right, this life. Even though it's messy and unexpected and nothing like what I planned, it feels like where I'm supposed to be. Caleb's expression softened slightly. Yeah, I know what you mean. Do you? When Sarah died, I thought... His voice caught. I thought that was it. The good part of my life was over. All I had left was surviving, keeping the ranch going, keeping Lila alive, but not actually living. He looked at her. And then you showed up, and things got complicated, but they also got better. The house feels alive again. Lila's smiling. He stopped. I'm not just surviving anymore. Evelyn's chest ached. I'm not her. I'll never be her. I know. And I'm not asking you to be. Caleb turned the ring on his finger again. But maybe you could be you, and maybe that's enough. Enough for what? For this to be real, eventually, not today, maybe not for a long time, but he met her eyes. But maybe someday this marriage could be more than just papers, if we wanted it to be. The words settled over Evelyn like a promise and a question all at once. She looked at this man, her husband, legally now, and tried to imagine a future where they were actually married. Not just living together for Lila's sake, actually choosing each other. Maybe, she said quietly. Someday. They sat in comfortable silence after that. The night sounds of the ranch filled the air. Somewhere in the house, Lila slept peacefully, secure in the knowledge that her family was intact. And maybe that's what mattered most. Not the romance of it, not the fairy tale, but the simple fact that they were here, together, trying to build something good out of broken pieces. The next few weeks passed in a strange new normal. Legally married, but living as they had before. Separate rooms, careful boundaries, a partnership built on practicality. Judge Brennan came by once, reviewed the marriage certificate, spoke briefly with Lila, and left satisfied. Mrs. Patterson stayed away, her silence somehow more ominous than her complaints. Evelyn learned the rhythms of the ranch more deeply. She learned that Caleb hated turnips and loved apple pie, that he sang old ballads when he worked alone in the barn, that he still kept Sarah's photograph on his dresser, but had moved it to face the wall. She learned that Lila had nightmares sometimes, waking crying for her mother. On those nights, Evelyn would go to her, holding her until she fell back asleep. And sometimes, in the doorway, she'd find Caleb watching them with an expression she couldn't quite read. The town slowly accepted them, or at least stopped openly gossiping. Pete was friendly when they came to the store. The Reverend nodded hello on the street. A few women even stopped to speak to Evelyn, cautiously at first, then with growing warmth when she proved to be normal and decent. Life went on. Days turned to weeks. The marriage certificate gathered dust in a drawer. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, things began to shift. It started small. Caleb's hand on Evelyn's back as he passed her in the kitchen. Evelyn automatically pouring his coffee in the morning. The way they moved around each other with growing familiarity, anticipating needs without words. Lila noticed. Of course she did. Children always noticed. "You and Daddy are different now," she said one afternoon while they made bread together. Different how? Happier, less sad. Lila punched down the dough with enthusiasm. "Do you love him?" Evelyn's hand stilled. "That's a complicated question, sweetheart." "Why? You're married. Married people love each other. Sometimes. But sometimes marriage is... How to explain this to a child? Sometimes it's more about partnership, about two people working together. But you could love him, if you wanted to. Could she? Evelyn thought about Caleb, his quiet strength, his devotion to Lila, the way he'd defended her against Mrs. Patterson, the way he sometimes looked at her across the dinner table like he was seeing something new. "Maybe," she admitted. "Someday." "I hope so," Lila said, "because I love you both. And it would be nice if you loved each other too." That evening, when Caleb came in from the fields, he found Evelyn on the porch. She'd taken to sitting there in the evenings, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. He sat down beside her without asking. It had become their routine. "Lila asked me if I loved you today," Evelyn said without preamble. Caleb went still. "What did you tell her?" "That it was complicated." "That's diplomatic." He was quiet for a moment. "Is it complicated?" "Isn't it?" Evelyn turned to look at him. "We got married out of necessity. We barely knew each other. You're still grieving your wife. I'm still figuring out who I am in this life. If that's not complicated, I don't know what is." "Fair point." Caleb leaned back against the porch post. "But maybe complicated doesn't mean impossible." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying..." He stopped, seeming to gather his thoughts. "I'm saying that when I married Sarah, it was simple. We were young. We fell in love. We got married. We built a life. It was good." His voice roughened. "It was so good." Evelyn's chest ached. "I know. But she's gone, and I've spent 8 months, 9 now, trying to figure out how to live without her, how to be a father without a partner, how to keep going when everything felt impossible." He looked at Evelyn. "And then you showed up, and you made things possible again." "Caleb, let me finish." He took a breath. "I'm not saying I'm in love with you. I'm not saying this marriage is suddenly a grand romance. But I'm saying I care about you, more than I expected to. And I think, maybe, we could build something real here. If we wanted to. Evelyn's heart was racing. What kind of real? The kind where this isn't just for Lila. The kind where we're actually partners, actually married. He reached out carefully and took her hand. The kind where maybe, eventually we fall in love. Or at least fall into something that looks like it. His hand was warm, calloused, real. Evelyn looked down at their joined fingers, at the rings they wore. That's terrifying, she said honestly. Yeah, it is. Caleb's thumb brushed over her knuckles. But not as terrifying as losing you, which is what would happen if we keep this at arm's length forever. You'd get bored, or restless, or you'd realize you deserve more than a marriage in name only, and you'd leave. I promised I wouldn't leave. Promises can break. I know that better than anyone. His grip tightened slightly. But if we actually tried, if we made this real, maybe the promise would hold. Evelyn sat with that, with the weight of what he was offering. Not love, not yet, but the possibility of it. The choice to build something together instead of just existing side by side. I'm scared, she admitted. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be a wife to a man who's still in love with someone else. I'm not... Caleb stopped. I'll always love Sarah. She was my first love, my first life. But she's gone. And you're here. And I think maybe there's room for both. For honoring what I had and building something new. And if it doesn't work, if we try and it's awful, then at least we tried. At least we gave it a chance. He smiled slightly. Besides, we're already married. Might as well see if we can make it work. Evelyn couldn't help it. She laughed. The absurdity of it all. Getting married to a stranger, building a life by accident, now choosing to make it real. It was too much. But also, somehow, exactly right. Okay, she said. Let's try. Really try. Caleb's face transformed. Relief and hope and something that might have been joy. He raised her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles, a courtly gesture that felt both formal and intimate. Thank you, he said quietly. They sat together as the sun finished setting, hands joined, watching the sky turn from gold to purple to black. Inside, Lila was probably listening at the window, hopeful and excited. And for the first time since getting off that wrong train, Evelyn felt like she'd arrived exactly where she was meant to be. The months that followed were a slow unfolding. Caleb courted her in his way, small gestures, careful attention. He brought her wildflowers from the pasture, fixed the squeaky hinge on her door without being asked, sat with her in the evenings, talking about everything and nothing. Evelyn let herself soften toward him, let herself notice the way he moved, the sound of his laugh, the gentleness in his hands when he braided Lila's hair. Let herself imagine what it might be like to actually be his wife in all the ways that mattered. Lila bloomed. The sad, desperate child who'd clung to Evelyn that first day transformed into something brighter. She laughed more, played more, started calling Evelyn Mama Evelyn without asking permission, and Evelyn found she didn't mind. One evening, about 4 months after the wedding, Evelyn found herself alone with Caleb in the kitchen. Lila was at a friend's house for the night, the first time she'd felt secure enough to leave them. They'd made dinner together, moving around each other with practiced ease. Now they sat at the table, coffee growing cold between them. Strange having the house this quiet, Caleb said. Yeah. Kind of nice, though. Evelyn smiled. Yeah. He reached across the table and took her hand, not careful anymore. Just natural. I've been thinking, he said. Dangerous activity, Evelyn teased. His mouth twitched. Probably. But I've been thinking about us, about this. He gestured between them. We've been doing this dance for months now, being careful, taking it slow. And I appreciate that. I needed that. But I'm tired of being careful. He met her eyes. I'm ready for this to be real. Actually real. Not just trying, actually being. Evelyn's breath caught. What are you asking? I'm asking if you'd move into my room. Into our room. He said it simply, but his eyes were intense. I'm asking if we can stop living like polite strangers and start living like people who chose each other. Because I have chosen you, Evelyn. Somewhere along the way, I stopped doing this just for Lila and started doing it for me too. Her heart hammered. And Sarah? Will always be part of my story, but she's not my future. You are. His grip tightened. If you want to be. Evelyn thought about the past months, the slow building of trust, the way she'd come to love this life, this place, this man, not the explosive passion of first love, but something steadier, something that felt like it could last. Yes, she said, I want to be. Caleb's face split into a grin. He stood, pulling her up with him, and kissed her properly for the first time since their wedding day. Not a chaste peck on the cheek, but a real kiss, deep and sure and full of promise. When they pulled apart, Evelyn was breathless. Well, she said, that was about damn time, Caleb suggested. I was going to say nice, but that works too. They laughed together, and Evelyn felt something settle in her chest. Something that felt like home, like belonging, like love, or at least the beginning of it. That night, she moved her things into Caleb's room, their room. And when Lila came home the next day and saw Evelyn's brush on the dresser next to her father's, the girl's squeal of delight could probably be heard all the way in Arroyo Seco. Time passed, seasons changed, the ranch thrived, Lila grew, and slowly, carefully, Evelyn and Caleb built a marriage that was real. Not perfect. They fought sometimes, about money, about the ranch, about how to handle Lila's occasional rebellions. Evelyn still had days where she felt like an imposter, playing at being someone's wife. Caleb still had moments where grief hit him out of nowhere, and he'd grow quiet and distant. But they worked through it, together. Because that's what partners did. A year after their hasty wedding, they had a small celebration. Just the three of them, plus Pete and the Reverend and a few neighbors who'd become friends. Nothing fancy. Just cake and coffee and acknowledgement that they'd made it. This family built by accident and choice in equal measure. Mrs. Patterson had moved away 6 months earlier, her influence waning as the town saw the Cross household thriving. Judge Brennan had closed their file, satisfied that Lila was well cared for. The gossip had died down to nothing. They were just another family now, nothing scandalous, nothing remarkable, except to each other. That night, after the guests left and Lila was asleep, Evelyn and Caleb sat on the porch. Their spot. She leaned against his shoulder, his arm around her waist. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For getting on the wrong train, for staying, for choosing us. He kissed the top of her head. For being my second chance. Evelyn smiled. Thank you for being mine. They sat in the darkness. Two people who'd found each other by accident and stayed by choice. The ranch stretched out around them, home now, not just a stopping point. And Evelyn thought about that first day. About standing on the platform with nothing but a carpet bag and crushed dreams. About a little girl who'd run into her arms by mistake. About how the wrong turn had led her exactly where she needed to be. Years later, when people asked how they'd met, Evelyn would tell them the truth, that she'd gotten on the wrong train, ended up in the wrong town, met her husband under the strangest circumstances, and that it had been the best mistake of her life. Because sometimes the wrong station was exactly the right one. Sometimes the detour was the actual destination. Sometimes the family you stumbled into was the family you were meant to find all along. Lila would grow up strong and loved, with memories of two mothers, one who gave her life, one who chose to stay. She'd tell her own children about the day her mama arrived on a train, lost and scared, and how her daddy had been brave enough to ask for help. And Evelyn would live the rest of her life as Evelyn Cross, wife and mother and partner. Not the mail-order bride she'd planned to be, not the governess searching for work, but herself, fully and finally. Home. The word had felt so elusive for so long, but here, in this rough house on this harsh land, with this man and this child, Evelyn had found it at last. Not by planning, not by following the map, but by getting lost first, and then by choosing to stay.